Relics and vestiges from the past help us understand the reality of our ancestors' lives. We can't help but wonder what everyday life was like for people in the past centuries. What was the social order like? What was the importance of beliefs in superior deities? While many archaeological discoveries in this regard have already been able to shed a lot of light into the historical darkness, other discoveries are not so easy to classify in a plausible context right away. In fact, some artifacts were so meticulously hidden by their creators that it seems as if modern humans should never be allowed to look at the mysterious buildings and objects again. Obviously, there are some artifacts that are still surrounded by great mysteries, and this even includes a place that has been left untouched for over thousands of years. Here are some of those artifacts and places. Khat Shabib. It's common knowledge that people in the past had a skillful knack for erecting monumental structures. It doesn't matter whether it is the colossal ancient Egyptian pyramids or the mighty Great Wall of China, although it should be mentioned that their corresponding structures are sometimes several thousand years old. They have successfully defied the gnawing ravages of time. As a result, some background puzzles of these monumental buildings can be quickly deciphered, which is the case of the Khat Shabib. Khat Shabib is an ancient wall that stretched through modern-day Jordan over an incredible length of 150 kilometers. No one had any idea when this mysterious but gigantic wall was built, and its purpose to those people. It was also unknown who had commissioned the construction of Khat Shabib. With regard to these highly fascinating questions, researchers and archaeologists can currently only speculate without having any definite answer. One of the stranger things is that while the imposing Great Wall of China, with its dimensions, served as an effective protective structure, Khat Shabib, of which nothing but ruins remains today, may have towered just 1 meter in height after its completion. Along with the remains, which were first discovered in 1948, the researchers again found traces of over 100 towers that initially had a diameter of between 2 and 4 meters. Ancient seismograph. In this current period, we like to boast that we are vastly superior to our ancient ancestors from a technical and scientific point of view. It may be true that airplanes, mobile phones, and televisions are a phenomenon of modern times, but this doesn't mean, conversely, that outstanding devices were not created during the Antiquity era that certainly does not have to differ from their more modern counterparts. This is undoubtedly the case with a century-old seismograph, developed by the Chinese scholar Zhang Hang in the 2nd century AD. While the device could not predict earthquakes, it was able to show the direction in which the tremors were coming from, even when the epicenter was hundreds of kilometers away. With the help of this ingenious invention, the emperor was able to have a timely reaction and send aid to the affected regions immediately after an earthquake. In detail, the fascinating seismograph was made of bronze and decorated with metal dragons, all of which pointed in a different direction. Each dragon's head carried a copper ball in its mouth, under which right copper toads with wide open mouths were placed. How exactly the sophisticated mechanism inside the seismograph worked could not be fully deciphered. However, experts generally assume that there was a kind of pendulum system in there that reacted very sensitively to vibrations. When an earthquake happened, the mouth of one of the dragons opened, after which the corresponding ball fell into the toad's mouth. Based on this, it was possible to determine in which direction the origin of the tremor lay. Indeed, some historical accounts suggest that the old earthquake detector was extremely accurate. According to this, one day, the west-facing dragon dropped its orb. A short time later, a man whose hometown was 650 kilometers away in the same direction arrived in the city and reported that a severe earthquake had occurred in his village. Unfortunately, Zhang Hang's original seismograph was lost over the centuries. However, some museums have detailed replicas of this groundbreaking invention. Deities. What prompted people hundreds of years ago to build a full-fledged city underground? This is precisely the question that experts have been asking since Deities was accidentally discovered in 1963. That mysterious underground place in the small Turkish town of the same name has not yet been fully unraveled. So far, 8 floors of the underground city have been uncovered, which spans an area of over 2,500 square meters. While the upper floors were probably primarily used for living and sleeping quarters, the complex also contained a monastery, meeting rooms, storage areas, and even a dungeon. Other rooms functioned as churches used by the residents for underground church services. But who were these residents? Some researchers suspect that Deities was once built by Christians to protect them from persecutors. In fact, it's now considered inevitable that the complex was used by Christian residents between the 6th and 10th centuries before it was brought into its present form. But were they also the creators of Deities? Quite a few experts believe that the history of the underground city goes back much further, so it is conceivable that it was the Hittites who built the underground settlement more than 4,000 years ago. However, the history of its origins and the question of the number of inhabitants have repeatedly caused heated debates in the ranks of experts. One side assumes that a maximum of 3,000 people lived there. At the same time, others put the number of residents at 50,000. No less exciting than the discovery of Derinkuyu was the realization that this was by no means an isolated case. So far, more than 30 underground cities have been found in the surrounding region. Dagger from space. In ancient Egypt, precious burial objects were an important factor in their culture. After all, from what we have gathered, the residents of ancient Egypt were somewhat obsessed with the afterlife and did everything they could to prepare themselves for it with the help of appropriate objects. The deceased souls were supposed to reach the afterlife unharmed and unerring. It's therefore not surprising that King Tutankhamun's final resting place resembled a sparkling treasury. However, a gold-decorated dagger with a blade made from non-rusting metal seemed particularly mysterious, and indeed, a scientific analysis a few years ago should provide proof that Tutankhamun's magnificent dagger is literally not from this world. In detail, this means the blade was once made from meteorite iron. However, the corresponding material could only be identified by the high proportion of nickel. The material composition suggests that the corresponding meteorite had already formed in the early phases of our solar system. Since the Egyptians were unable to mine or smelt iron themselves at the time, the metal that came to Earth enclosed in meteorites was considered a sacred message from the gods. However, the meteorite dagger was not the only galactic artifact recovered from Tutankhamun's tomb. This is how the figure of a scarab battle was made from glass, which was formed when a meteorite fell on the Earth and melted the sand. However, theories about these objects vary. For some people, this is proof that the ancient Egyptians were in contact with extraterrestrial beings. After all, if you were an alien race that had just landed in a world full of humans, what would be the first thing you would do? Most people would want to offer some sort of peace offering to prove they mean no harm. For some theorists, this peace offering may have come in the form of a sacred dagger or even a glass scarab. It is a far-fetched idea, but it certainly has made the rounds in certain communities online and in the real world. Hand of Glory. At first glance, the name Hand of Glory sounds heroic. A closer look at the shriveled, gray-brown body part on display at England's Whitby Museum is rather disturbing, especially when you add the incredible tale that surrounds the Hand of Glory. And we know it couldn't be further from honor and heroism. Basically, in the simple folk beliefs of the past centuries, it was not uncommon to use body parts for magical means. These were often used to ward off evil forces or produce healing potions. Sometimes, it was enough to touch a sick person with the hand of a dead person to free them from their suffering. At least, that was the superstition of the time. While disturbing, most of these bizarre things were used for peaceful purposes, but not the Hand of Glory. According to the fascinating legends, it was a supernatural burglary tool. To be more detailed, the hand of the dead was used to put the occupants of a house into a deep sleep, so that the thieves could use their belongings in peace of mind. In fact, the grotesque body part on display at the Whitby Museum was far from being the only one of its kind. Some 17th century reports tell of what needs to be considered when making these supernatural hands of the dead. The first step was to soak the severed hand in salt and the urine of a man, woman, horse, and dog, and smoke it with hay and herbs for a month. Subsequently, the Hand of Glory had to be hung from an oak tree, placed on a street, and placed on a church door for a night. Anyone who followed these disturbing production instructions could henceforth call themselves a proud owner of a Hand of Glory.